Wife humiliated by groom's family, unaware of her real identity. Until she cancels. The 950-meter deal. The grand ballroom of the Sterling Hotel sparkled like a treasure chest filled with diamonds. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow lights across the marble floors. Tables dressed in silk cloth held golden plates and silver spoons that caught the light with every movement. The air smelled of expensive perfume mixed with roses that cost more than most people made in a month. This was supposed to be the most beautiful night of Sophia Chen's life. The rehearsal dinner before her wedding to Marcus Sterling, heir to one of the biggest real estate empires in the country. But as Sophia stood at the entrance, wearing a simple navy dress that she had bought with her own money, she could feel the weight of 100 judging eyes upon her. The whispers started before she even took her first step into the room. They floated through the air like poison, meant to wound, meant to remind her that she didn't belong. "Look at her dress," someone said behind a raised champagne glass. "Did she buy it from a department store?" Another voice joined in, dripping with fake sweetness. "Marcus must really love charity work to marry someone like that." Sophia kept her head high and walked forward, each step feeling like she was walking through thick mud. Her heart beat so loud in her chest that she was sure everyone could hear it. She searched the room for Marcus, her anchor in this storm of judgment. She found him near the bar, surrounded by his business partners, laughing at something one of them had said. When he saw her approaching, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Instead of coming to greet her, instead of taking her hand and making her feel safe, he simply nodded and turned back to his conversation. The message was clear. She was on her own tonight. Sophia found her assigned seat at the main table, right next to Marcus's mother, Eleanor Sterling. Eleanor was everything Sophia wasn't. Tall, elegant, wearing diamonds that could buy a small house, with silver hair styled to perfection and eyes as cold as winter frost. To her other side sat Marcus's sister, Victoria, younger but equally cruel, with a smile that never meant anything good. "So nice of you to join us," Eleanor said, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as a knife. "We were just discussing the wedding arrangements. Of course, we've had to make some adjustments. Not everyone can afford the Sterling standard, can they?" The words stung. But Sophia had heard worse over the past year since she and Marcus had announced their engagement. She had endured every insult, every backhanded compliment, every cruel joke at her expense. Why? Because she loved Marcus. Or at least, she loved the man he used to be when they were alone, away from his family and their world of money and power. She remembered their first meeting at a charity event 2 years ago. He had been different then. Or maybe he had just been better at pretending. He had told her she was refreshing, that she was real in a world full of fake people. He had pursued her with flowers and late-night phone calls, with promises of a future where love mattered more than money. But that Marcus seemed to disappear more and more each day, especially when his family was around. "Tell me," Victoria leaned in, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "what exactly does your family do? I mean, we've all been dying to know. Marcus keeps saying you're from a simple background, but surely there must be something interesting about you." Sophia felt the heat rise to her cheeks. Around them, conversations had quieted as people listened for her answer. This was theater for them, entertainment at her expense. "My family values hard work and kindness," Sophia replied quietly, keeping her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Those might not be currencies you're familiar with." A few people gasped at her small act of defiance, but Victoria just laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "How sweet. She thinks kindness pays the bills." Eleanor touched her wine glass with one manicured finger. "In our world, dear, kindness is what the poor tell themselves they have when they have nothing else. You would do well to remember that you're entering the Sterling family now. We have standards, expectations. You'll need to elevate yourself." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia looked across the table at Marcus, hoping for any sign of support, any indication that he would defend her. But he was deep in conversation with a business partner, deliberately not looking her way. As the dinner continued, the humiliation only grew worse. When Sophia reached for the wrong fork, Eleanor made sure everyone noticed with a loud clearing of her throat and a pointed look. When she tried to join a conversation about art, Victoria interrupted to ask if she even knew what an original painting cost, implying she had only seen prints in waiting rooms. When the main course arrived, an elaborate dish with a French name Sophia couldn't pronounce, Eleanor announced to the table that they would need to hire someone to teach Sophia proper etiquette before the wedding. "We can't have her embarrassing us at important events," she said, as if Sophia wasn't sitting right there, as if she was a pet that needed training rather than a person with feelings. The worst part wasn't even the cruelty. It was the laughter that followed. The way everyone at surrounding tables chuckled and whispered, enjoying the show of the poor girl being put in her place by the rich family she was trying to marry into. Marcus finally looked her way when dessert was being served, and for a moment Sophia felt hope flutter in her chest. Maybe he would say something. Maybe he would take her hand and remind everyone that she was going to be his wife, that she deserved respect. Instead, he stood up and raised his glass for a toast. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began, his voice carrying across the room. "As you all know, my engagement to Sophia has been unexpected." He paused for the laughter he knew would come. But sometimes in life, we all need a project. Something to work on, to improve, to mold into something better. Sophia has been that project for me. The words hit Sophia like physical blows. Project, improve, mold. She wasn't his partner, his equal, his love. She was something broken that he was trying to fix, a charity case he had taken on to make himself look good. "Of course," Marcus continued, smiling at the crowd, "she still has a long way to go. But with the Sterling family's guidance, I'm sure she'll eventually learn to fit in. Or at least, she'll learn to try." More laughter, more applause, more glasses raised in a toast to her humiliation. Sophia stood up slowly, her legs shaking but her resolve growing stronger with each second. She had endured so much, believing that love would be enough, that Marcus would change, that his family would eventually accept her. But standing there, looking at the smiling faces of people who saw her as entertainment, as less than human, something inside her finally snapped. Or rather, something inside her finally awakened. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying a strength that made the room quiet down. "This engagement has been unexpected, especially for me." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, her fingers steady as she scrolled to a contact. "You see, I've been playing a role this entire time. The poor girl, the nobody, the charity case you all could mock and laugh at. I let you do it because I wanted to see who Marcus really was when he thought I had nothing to offer but myself." Eleanor scoffed, but there was uncertainty in her eyes now. "What are you talking about, you silly girl?" Sophia smiled, and for the first time all evening, it was genuine. "My full name is Sophia Chen Blackwood. My mother is Evelyn Chen, and my father was Richard Blackwood." She watched as recognition dawned on faces around the room. The Chen Blackwood name was legendary in business circles, a family empire that had built its fortune through technology and innovation, worth billions more than the Sterling family could ever dream of. "That's impossible," Victoria stammered, her face going pale. "The Chen Blackwoods don't have a daughter. Everyone knows that." "Everyone knows what we wanted them to know," Sophia replied calmly. "I've spent my life away from the spotlight, choosing to make my own way, to earn my own achievements without trading on my family name. I wanted to find love based on who I am, not what I'm worth. And Marcus, you showed me exactly what kind of man you are." She turned to face Marcus fully, watching as his confident smile crumbled into confusion and growing panic. "When we met, I was just Sophia Chen, working at a charity. You pursued me because you thought I was different, remember? But the moment your family started questioning my worth, you joined them. You called me your project. You stood by while they humiliated me, night after night, thinking I was powerless to respond." The room was dead silent now, everyone hanging on her every word. But here's the thing about power, Marcus. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to put others down to feel big. Real power is knowing when to walk away from people who don't deserve you. She pulled out a folder from her purse, one she had been carrying all evening, waiting for the right moment. This is the contract for the Sterling Blackwood merger. The $950 million deal your father has been desperately trying to close for the past 6 months. The deal that would save your family's company from the massive debts you've been hiding from your investors. Marcus's father, Richard Sterling, stood up from his table across the room, his face flushed with alarm. "Now, let's not be hasty," he started, but Sophia held up her hand. "I'm not being hasty. I'm being decisive. You see, what none of you knew was that every cruel word, every humiliation, every moment you made me feel worthless, I reported back to my mother. She's been watching, waiting to see if the Sterling family was worthy of joining forces with the Chen Blackwood empire. And the verdict! She tore the contract in half, the sound echoing through the silent ballroom like thunder. The deal is off, permanently." The chaos that erupted was immediate. Richard Sterling rushed forward, his composure completely shattered. "You can't do this? We had an agreement." "You had an agreement with Evelyn Chen," Sophia corrected, "and she gives me full authority to make this decision. You see, Mr. Sterling, you thought you were getting a business deal. But my mother, she was testing something else. She was testing your family's character, your values, your ability to treat people with basic human dignity. You failed spectacularly." Eleanor stood up, her face white with rage and fear. "This is ridiculous. You can't destroy us because of a few harmless comments." Sophia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Harmless? You spent a year systematically trying to break me down, to make me feel worthless, to humiliate me in front of everyone you knew. You did it for sport, for entertainment. And Marcus," she turned to her former fiancé who looked like he might faint, "you were the worst of all, because you claimed to love me while you watched it happen. You participated in it. You called me your project, something to be fixed and molded. That's not love. That's ownership." She walked to Marcus and pulled off her engagement ring, pressing it into his palm. "I feel sorry for you, actually. You had the chance to be with someone who loved you for exactly who you were, flaws and all. But you were so blinded by your family's arrogance, so concerned with appearances and status, that you threw it away for the approval of people who don't even know what real love looks like." Marcus finally found his voice, desperation making it crack. "Sophia, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean those things. It was just for show, for my family. You know the real me. You know I love you." But Sophia shook her head, stepping back from him. "No, Marcus. I thought I knew you. I thought underneath all the Sterling family pressure, there was a good man who just needed the courage to stand up for what was right. But you showed me who you really are. A man who would sacrifice the woman he claims to love just to keep his family happy. A man who thinks love is a project, not a partnership." She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as she could. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. The next time you think it's funny to humiliate someone because you think they're beneath you, remember this moment. Remember that karma has a way of balancing the scales, and sometimes it comes wearing a simple navy dress and a smile." The Sterling family stood frozen as Sophia walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a steady rhythm. But she wasn't quite done. At the doorway, she turned back one more time. "Oh, and Marcus? Your family isn't just losing the merger. My mother has already contacted your other investors. Once they find out the Chen Blackwood empire has pulled out, they'll follow. By Monday morning, Sterling Enterprises will be worthless. You should probably start updating your resume, though I doubt anyone will want to hire a man who is only good at making projects out of people." She could hear the shouting starting as she left. Richard Sterling screaming at his son, Eleanor demanding someone do something, Victoria crying about their social standing. But Sophia didn't look back. She had spent too long looking back, hoping for change, hoping for love, hoping for acceptance from people who didn't deserve her hope. Outside the hotel, a car was waiting. Not just any car, but a limited-edition luxury vehicle that cost more than most houses. Her driver, James, who had been with her family for years, smiled at her in the rearview mirror as she got in. "How did it go, Miss Sophia?" he asked gently. "Exactly as expected," she replied. finally allowing herself to feel the weight of what had just happened. They showed their true colors, just like Mother predicted they would. "And the young Mr. Sterling?" James asked carefully. Sophia was quiet for a moment, feeling the ghost of what might have been, the shadow of the love she had once felt. "He made his choice, James. He chose his family's approval over love. He chose their cruelty over my heart, and now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice." As the car pulled away from the hotel, Sophia's phone began buzzing with messages. Her mother checking in, her father's business partners who had been watching the Sterling situation closely, friends who had been worried about her throughout this whole ordeal. But she didn't answer any of them yet. Instead, she rolled down the window and let the cool night air wash over her face, breathing in freedom for the first time in over a year. She had learned something valuable through all of this pain. Love wasn't about changing yourself to fit someone else's world. It wasn't about enduring cruelty in the hope that kindness would eventually come. Love was about respect, about partnership, about two people choosing each other every single day, especially when it was hard. Marcus and his family had taught her what love wasn't, and in doing so, they had freed her to find what love actually was. The news of what happened at the Sterling rehearsal dinner spread through high society like wildfire. Within hours, every major business publication had picked up the story. Chen Blackwood heiress reveals identity, cancels $950 million deal with Sterling Enterprises. The headlines were everywhere, each one more sensational than the last. Videos taken by guests at the dinner went viral on social media, showing Sophia's calm, dignified response to the Sterling family's cruelty. The public response was overwhelming. People who had experienced similar treatment from wealthy families, people who had been made to feel small and worthless, they all saw themselves in Sophia's story. She became an overnight sensation, not for her wealth but for her courage to stand up to bullies who thought their money made them untouchable. The Sterling family, meanwhile, watched their empire crumble in real time. True to Sophia's prediction, once the Chen Blackwood empire pulled out, other investors followed suit. The stock price plummeted. Banks called in loans. Within a week, Sterling Enterprises had to file for bankruptcy. Marcus tried to reach out to Sophia countless times. He sent flowers, letters, emails, text messages, all begging for another chance. He showed up at the Chen Blackwood offices, only to be turned away by security. He even tried to use the media, giving interviews where he claimed he had always loved her, that his family had pressured him, that he was a victim too. But Sophia never responded. She had said everything she needed to say that night at the dinner. There was nothing left between them but the echo of what could have been if he had been a different kind of man. Eleanor and Victoria Sterling found themselves exiled from the social circles they had once ruled. The same people who had laughed along with their cruel jokes about Sophia now whispered about them behind their backs. They had become cautionary tales, examples of how arrogance and cruelty could lead to downfall. The invitations stopped coming. The phone stopped ringing. They learned what it felt like to be on the outside looking in, to be judged and found wanting. Richard Sterling aged 10 years in a month, watching everything he had built disappear. He tried to blame everyone else, his son for not knowing who Sophia really was, his wife for being too cruel, the investors for being cowards. But late at night, when he was alone with his thoughts, he knew the truth. They had brought this on themselves. They had been given a gift, a woman who loved their son genuinely, who would have been an asset to their family in every way. And they had thrown her away because she didn't fit their narrow definition of worthy. Now they were paying the price for that arrogance. As for Sophia, she threw herself into her work with the Chen Blackwood Foundation, using her position to help young entrepreneurs who, like her, had been dismissed and underestimated. She started a program specifically for women who had been in emotionally abusive relationships, helping them rebuild their confidence and their lives. She became known not just as an heiress, but as someone who used her privilege to lift others up rather than tear them down. About 6 months after the dinner, Sophia was speaking at a conference about resilience and self-worth when someone asked her if she regretted how things had ended with Marcus. She thought about it for a moment before answering. "I regret that he wasn't the man I thought he was," she said honestly. I regret the time I spent hoping he would change, that his family would accept me. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret showing them that their cruelty had consequences. And I certainly don't regret walking away from people who only saw my value in terms of what they could mold me into." The audience applauded, many with tears in their eyes. Her story had resonated with so many people who had been in similar situations, who had been made to feel less than by people who thought money and status gave them the right to be cruel. A year after the dinner, Sophia met someone new. His name was David Kim, a doctor who ran free clinics in underserved communities. He didn't know who she was when they first met at a charity event. To him, she was just Sophia, a woman who was passionate about making the world better. When he eventually learned about her family and her wealth, it didn't change how he treated her. He loved her for her kindness, her strength, her intelligence, and her terrible jokes that made him laugh even when they weren't funny. He loved her for exactly who she was, not who he thought he could turn her into. Their relationship was everything her relationship with Marcus hadn't been. It was built on mutual respect, on genuine affection, on the understanding that love meant accepting someone completely, flaws and all. David stood up to anyone who tried to diminish Sophia, and she did the same for him. They were partners in the truest sense of the word. When David proposed, it wasn't at a massive public event designed to impress others. It was during a quiet dinner at the small restaurant where they had their first date. He got down on one knee right there between the main course and dessert. With no photographers, no audience, just the two of them and a ring that he had saved for months to buy. Not knowing that Sophia could have bought the entire jewelry store, she said yes immediately, tears streaming down her face, not because of the ring or the proposal, but because she had found someone who saw her, really saw her, and loved every part of what he saw. Their wedding was small, intimate, with only close family and friends. There were no reporters, no society photographers, no one there to judge or perform for. Just people who genuinely loved them and wanted to celebrate their happiness. The Sterling family was not invited, of course. By then, they had faded into obscurity, their fortune gone, their reputation destroyed. Marcus had managed to find work at a small real estate firm, starting from the bottom, learning what it meant to actually work for a living rather than coast on his family name. He heard about Sophia's wedding through social media, saw the pictures of her smiling with genuine joy beside a man who looked at her like she hung the stars. He wondered in his darker moments if that could have been him, if he had made different choices, if he had stood up to his family, if he had chosen love over their approval. But those were questions without answers, paths that could no longer be traveled. Eleanor Sterling now lived in a small apartment, her diamonds sold to pay debts, her designer clothes replaced with items from department stores she had once mocked. She worked as a receptionist at a law firm, serving coffee to people who had once served her. The irony was not lost on her. Sometimes she thought about that night at the rehearsal dinner, about how differently things might have gone if they had just been kind. If they had welcomed Sophia, embraced her, treated her with the respect she deserved. They could have had the merger, the money, the continued status. More than that, they could have had a daughter-in-law who would have brought honor to their family through her actions and character rather than just her bank account. Victoria Sterling had perhaps the hardest fall. She had built her entire identity around being superior to others, around her family's wealth and status. Without those things, she didn't know who she was. She tried to rebuild her life, but the habits of cruelty and entitlement were hard to break. She found herself alone, her former friends having abandoned her the moment the money ran out. She learned, slowly and painfully, what Sophia had tried to show them that night, that real worth had nothing to do with money and everything to do with how you treated other people. Years passed, and the story of the Sterling rehearsal dinner became legend in business schools and society circles. It was taught as a case study in hubris, in the dangers of arrogance and cruelty. Professors would tell their students about how a family had everything: wealth, status, power, and lost it all because they couldn't show basic human kindness to someone they deemed beneath them. They would talk about Sophia Chen Blackwood, who had the strength to walk away from a toxic situation, the wisdom to know her own worth, and the courage to stand up to bullies even when it would have been easier to stay silent. Sophia herself rarely talked about that night anymore. She had moved on, built a beautiful life with David, had 2 children who were being raised to understand that kindness and respect were worth more than all the money in the world. But occasionally, when she was speaking to young women who were in situations similar to what she had experienced, she would tell the story. She would tell them about the years she spent being humiliated, belittled, made to feel worthless by people who thought their money gave them the right to be cruel. She would tell them about the moment she finally stood up and revealed who she really was, not to hurt them, though that was a consequence, but to free herself from their toxicity. And she would always end with the same message that no one had the right to make you feel worthless. That love should never require you to accept disrespect. That sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was walk away from people who didn't deserve you. The title of her story had become famous, whispered in business circles and relationship advice columns alike. Wife humiliated by groom's family, unaware of her real identity until she cancels the $950 deal. It had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of judging people by their appearance, of assuming that quiet dignity meant weakness, of believing that money gave you the right to be cruel. But for Sophia, it was simpler than that. It was the story of a woman who had loved genuinely and been betrayed by that love. It was the story of finding the strength to stand up for herself when everyone around her was trying to push her down. It was the story of learning that her worth didn't come from anyone else's validation, but from her own knowledge of who she was and what she deserved. On the 5th anniversary of that infamous rehearsal dinner, Sophia received a letter. She recognized Marcus's handwriting immediately. For a moment, she considered throwing it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was long, pages and pages of apology and regret. Marcus wrote about how losing everything had taught him the value of what he had thrown away. He wrote about working his way up from nothing, about learning what it meant to be judged for his current circumstances rather than his family name. He wrote about the therapy he had undergone to understand why he had been so willing to participate in his family's cruelty. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for another chance. He simply wanted her to know that he finally understood what he had lost, that he had loved her, but had been too weak and too influenced by his family to protect that love. He wanted her to know that she had been right about everything and that he was sorry for the pain he had caused. Sophia read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and put it away. She didn't respond. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said. Marcus had made his choices, and those choices had consequences. She had made hers too, choosing self-respect over a toxic relationship, choosing to reveal her truth rather than continue living a lie. Those choices had led her to where she was now, happy, fulfilled, loved by a man who would stand by her side no matter what. That evening, as she watched David play with their children in the garden, their laughter filling the air with joy, she thought about how different her life might have been if she had stayed with Marcus, if she had accepted the humiliation, married into the Sterling family, lived a life of being constantly diminished and disrespected. She would have had money, certainly. Though she had never needed the Sterling money, she would have had status in certain circles. But she wouldn't have had love, real love, the kind that made you feel valued and cherished every single day. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. David looked up and caught her watching them, his face breaking into a smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. He called out to her to join them, and she did, running into the garden where her daughter immediately attached herself to her leg and her son demanded to be picked up. This was wealth, she thought. This was success. This was everything the Sterling family had never understood. True richness came from being surrounded by people who loved you for exactly who you were. True power came from knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone make you feel like less. True happiness came from choosing love that lifted you up rather than pushed you down. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sophia held her family close and felt gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for the strength to walk away from what was wrong. Gratitude for the courage to stand up for herself. And yes, even gratitude for the painful experience with the Sterling family because it had taught her what she would and would not accept in her life. The story of that rehearsal dinner would continue to be told for years to come. Business students would study it. Relationship experts would reference it. Parents would use it to teach their children about the importance of kindness and the dangers of arrogance. But for Sophia, it would always be more personal than that. It would be the night she chose herself. The night she stopped accepting less than she deserved. The night she proved that sometimes the person being humiliated is the one holding all the power, they just have to be brave enough to use it. And so the title that had become famous, Wife Humiliated by Groom's Family, unaware of her real identity until she cancels the $950 deal, wasn't just a headline or a cautionary tale. It was a reminder that everyone has the power to change their story, to refuse to be a victim, to stand up and declare their worth. It was proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, but simply living well and leaving those who tried to break you to deal with the consequences of their own cruelty. Sophia Chen Blackwood had been tested by fire and emerged not burned, but forged into something stronger. She had learned that love without respect was just possession. That kindness wasn't weakness, but strength. That sometimes the most powerful thing you could say was goodbye. And in saying that goodbye to the Sterling family, in canceling that deal and walking away from that toxic situation, she had said hello to a life filled with genuine love, real respect, and the kind of happiness that no amount of money could buy. The Sterling family had thought they were teaching her a lesson about her place in their world. Instead, she had taught them a lesson about what really mattered in any world. And that lesson, written in the ashes of their fallen empire, would endure long after their names were forgotten.